Aaron Ralston. Aaron Ralston thought it would be a simple trip. Within days, he would be forced to choose between his arm and his life. On April 26, 2003, in Blue John Canyon, Utah, Aaron went canyoneering alone. He was experienced, confident, and familiar with the terrain. He didn't tell anyone where he was going. He didn't expect anything to go wrong. Deep inside the narrow canyon, as Aaron climbed down a tight passage, a massive boulder suddenly shifted. It slammed into his left arm, pinning it against the canyon wall. The rock weighed hundreds of pounds. No matter how hard he pulled or twisted, it did not move. Aaron stayed calm. He chipped at the rock with a small pocket knife. He tried ropes and leverage. Nothing worked. There was no cell signal. No one knew where he was. The canyon was silent. Hours turned into days. He rationed his food and water, taking small sips to survive. The sun rose and fell above the canyon walls as his strength faded. Dehydration set in. His arm lost feeling, then color. The pressure had completely cut off circulation. After nearly 5 days, Aaron understood the truth. If he stayed, he would die there. No rescue was coming, so he made the only decision left. Using a dull multi-tool, Aaron broke the bones in his own forearm and amputated it to free himself. The pain was extreme, but it was the price of escape. Still bleeding, he rappelled down a cliff and hiked for hours through the desert with one arm. Aaron survived. He was eventually found by hikers and rescued. He entered the canyon expecting a normal day. He left it knowing the true cost of survival. Uruguayan Air Force Flight 571. Nando Parado was sitting near the back of the plane when it began to fall apart. On October 13, 1972, Nando boarded a flight from Uruguay to Chile with his rugby team, friends, and family members. His mother and sister were on the same plane. It was supposed to be an ordinary trip across the Andes. Instead, the aircraft flew into a snowstorm. Without warning, the plane struck a mountain ridge. The impact tore it apart in midair. The fuselage crashed onto a glacier more than 11,000 feet above sea level. Nando lost consciousness. When he woke up, the world was white and silent. The plane was broken open. Bodies were scattered across the snow. Many passengers were dead. Others were injured, bleeding, and screaming in the freezing air. Nando searched for his family. His mother was gone. His sister was alive but badly injured. He stayed beside her, trying to keep her warm, believing help would come. Days later, she died. The cold never stopped. The survivors were trapped on the glacier with no food, sheltering inside the shattered fuselage. They used pieces of the wreckage to block the wind, but every night the temperature dropped far below freezing. Snowstorms buried the plane again and again. Days passed, then weeks. The little food they had ran out quickly. Frozen bodies lay nearby, preserved by the cold. No one spoke about them. No one wanted to. Then an avalanche hit the wreckage. Nando was buried under snow, unable to move or breathe. When he was dug out, several others were dead. The survivors were weaker than ever. Hope was disappearing. That night, Nando sat alone in the darkness, and he admitted the truth he was afraid to say out loud. If they stayed, they would all die. Soon after, the group faced a decision no one wanted to make. With no rescue coming and no food left, they chose to eat the frozen bodies of those who had died. It was not bravery, it was survival. Weeks later, Nando made another choice. Waiting was no longer an option. Along with Roberto Canessa, he left the crash site on foot, crossing glaciers and peaks with no climbing gear. After 10 days of walking through snow and rock, they found help. Rescue teams returned to the crash site and brought the remaining survivors home. In total, they endured 72 days in one of the most hostile environments on Earth, but survival came with a cost they would carry for the rest of their life. Harrison O'Keene. On May 26, 2013, Harrison O'Keene was working as a cook aboard the tugboat Jascon 4 off the coast of Nigeria. The job was ordinary and routine. The vessel was supporting oil operations, and Harrison was below deck preparing food for the crew. Nothing suggested that the ship was about to become a coffin. Without warning, a powerful wave struck the tugboat. The vessel lost stability and capsized rapidly. In seconds, the ship flipped upside down and began to sink. Water rushed through corridors and compartments, trapping crew members inside the steel hull. Harrison was thrown into darkness as the ship filled with water. He was dragged through flooding passages, disoriented and panicking. Somehow he found himself in a small air pocket inside a bathroom. The water stopped rising just below the ceiling. Everything else around him was completely submerged. The ship settled on the ocean floor nearly 100 feet below the surface. It was pitch black. The water was cold. The air pocket was barely large enough to stand in. Harrison had no food, no light, and no way to signal for help. Salt water slowly soaked into the space, contaminating the air and burning his skin. Hours passed, then an entire day, then another. Harrison rationed his breath instinctively, standing still to conserve oxygen. He drank Coca-Cola floating nearby to avoid dehydration, knowing that seawater would kill him faster. The pressure crushed his ears. His body weakened. He expected to die at any moment. After nearly 60 hours underwater, divers arrived at the wreck to recover bodies. They did not expect survivors. When a diver's light suddenly moved inside the wreck, Harrison saw it and began waving his arms in the darkness.
Help! Help me! I'm going under!
The diver froze in shock. A living man was standing inside a sunken ship. Harrison was brought to the surface inside a diving bell to prevent decompression sickness. Doctors later said his survival defied explanation. Extended exposure to cold, lack of oxygen, and toxic air should have killed him long before rescue arrived. Julianne Koepke fell from nearly 10,000 feet above the Peruvian Amazon, and she lived. On December 24, 1971, Julianne was 17 years old. She had boarded Lanza Flight 508 with her mother in Lima, Peru. It was Christmas Eve. The flight was supposed to be routine. Midway through the journey, the plane flew directly into a violent thunderstorm. Lightning struck the aircraft. The cabin tore open. Passengers, seats, and luggage were ripped out and thrown into the open sky. Julianne fell with her seat. Somehow, it absorbed part of the impact as she crashed through the forest canopy. She hit the ground unconscious, alone, and surrounded by wreckage. When she woke up, her body was broken. Her collarbone was fractured. Her arm was badly injured. One eye was swollen shut. Her glasses were gone. Around her, the rainforest was silent. Everyone else on the plane was dead, including her mother. Julianne was alone. She began to walk. With no food except a few candies from the wreckage, Julianne moved through the jungle one step at a time. She followed a small stream, remembering her father's advice. Water always leads somewhere. Insects crawled into her wounds. Maggots infested a deep cut in her arm. She poured water over it, forcing them out, because she remembered what her parents had taught her. The jungle did not stop. The heat, the humidity, the infections, and the exhaustion wore her down each day. She slept on the forest floor. She waded through rivers without knowing what lived beneath the surface. At times, pain and dehydration blurred her thoughts, and she began to hallucinate. On the 11th day, barely able to stand, Julianne stumbled upon a small hut used by loggers. Not long after, local workers found her and carried her to safety. She had fallen from the sky, lost her mother, and crossed the jungle alone, and somehow she survived. Jose Salvador Alvarenga. Jose Salvador Alvarenga was lost at sea for 1.5 years. On November 17, 2012, Jose left the coast of Mexico on a small fishing boat with a younger crewmate.
Let's head out past the point.
The trip was supposed to be short. Jose was experienced. The plan was simple: catch fish, return home. Then the storm arrived. Powerful winds pushed the boat far into the Pacific Ocean. The engine failed. Communication equipment stopped working. The coastline vanished. Within days, both men understood they were lost. The boat drifted. Days passed. Then weeks. With no engine and no navigation, the ocean decided where they went. Supplies ran out quickly. Fresh water became the first crisis. They survived by taking what the sea provided. They caught fish with their hands. They ate raw turtles, birds, and fish. When rain fell, they collected it. When it did not, they drank turtle blood. The sun burned their skin during the day. Cold winds cut through them at night. There was no shelter, no shade, no escape. Time stopped behaving normally. The younger crewmate grew weaker. He stopped eating. He became sick and exhausted. Jose tried to keep him alive, but the sea did not allow it. Eventually, the crewmate died. Jose was left alone on the boat with a body he could not bury. After that, there was only silence. Months passed with no rescue. Ships crossed the horizon without seeing him. Storms battered the boat. Saltwater sores covered his body. His muscles wasted away. Some days he wanted to die. Other days, surviving one more day was enough. The ocean carried him on. After 438 days at sea, the boat drifted close to land. Jose washed ashore on a small island in the Marshall Islands, barely able to walk. He had survived over a year lost at sea. Doctors and authorities struggled to believe his story. Survival experts called it one of the longest confirmed castaway cases in history. Pawn Lim. On November 23, 1942, during World War II, Pawn Lim was working as a steward aboard the British cargo ship SS Benjamin in the Atlantic Ocean. He was not a soldier. He was a civilian crew member, doing a job meant to keep the ship running smoothly during wartime transport. That morning, a German U-boat torpedo struck the ship without warning. The explosion tore through the hull. The SS Benjamin sank rapidly. Within minutes, the ship was gone. Almost the entire crew was killed. Pawn Lim managed to escape into the water. He swam through burning fuel and debris and found a small wooden life raft. There was no radio, no engine, no navigation tools, just open ocean in every direction. The raft carried only minimal supplies, a few tins of water, some biscuits, a flashlight. Once those ran out, survival became entirely dependent on improvisation. Pawn Lim used a knife to carve hooks. He used rope fibers to make fishing lines. He caught fish and seabirds. He drank rainwater, and when desperate, small amounts of seawater mixed with fresh rain. The sun burned him during the day. At night, the cold soaked into his bones. Sharks circled the raft constantly. Storms tossed him violently across the waves. Saltwater sores formed on his skin. Hunger became constant. Loneliness became crushing. Days turned into weeks. Weeks turned into months. Ships passed by without stopping. Some never saw him. Others ignored the raft entirely. Each time a ship disappeared on the horizon, hope faded a little more. After 133 days alone at sea, Pawn Lim drifted close to the coast of Brazil. Fishermen finally spotted the raft and pulled him to safety. He was severely malnourished but alive. Beck Weathers. On May 10, 1996, Beck Weathers was part of a commercial expedition attempting to reach the summit of Mount Everest. He was not a professional climber chasing records. He was a paying client, a pathologist from Texas, standing on the highest and most dangerous mountain on Earth. As the team descended from near the summit, weather conditions collapsed without warning. A violent blizzard engulfed the mountain. Visibility dropped to almost zero. Winds screamed across the slopes, and temperatures plunged far below freezing. Climbers became separated, lost, and disoriented within minutes. Beck was struck by severe snowblindness and exhaustion. Unable to see clearly and barely able to move, he collapsed in the storm along with other climbers. Rescue attempts failed as the blizzard intensified. Eventually, guides were forced to make an impossible decision. Beck Weathers was declared dead and left behind on the mountain. Hours later, against all logic, Beck regained consciousness. Alone in the dark, surrounded by ice and hurricane-force winds, he stood up. His face was frozen solid. His hands were severely frostbitten. His body temperature was dangerously low. Still, he began walking. He stumbled through the storm blindly, following instinct rather than sight. At one point, he collapsed again and was found by teammates. Once more, he was assumed to be beyond saving. Once more, he was left behind to die in the freezing night. But Beck refused to die. Sometime later, he stood up again. Barely recognizable as human, his face blackened by frostbite and his hands destroyed, he walked into camp under his own power. Other climbers stared in disbelief. Many thought they were seeing a ghost. Beck survived, but the cost was devastating. He lost his nose. Both hands were amputated. Parts of his feet were removed. His body carried permanent damage from exposure that should have been fatal. Ricky McGee was alone in the Australian outback, and he was running out of water. In January 2006, Ricky was traveling through a remote stretch of desert in Western Australia. The land was vast and empty. During the day, the heat was crushing. At night, temperatures dropped sharply. Towns were separated by days of walking. At some point, Ricky became separated from his vehicle. He was disoriented and unprepared. He had almost no supplies. There was no phone signal, no shelter, no clear direction. Every step took him farther from help. The heat drained his strength quickly. Dehydration became the immediate threat. Without water, the human body fails in days. Ricky knew that if he did not find a way to drink, he would die where he stood. So he did what survival demanded. When rain fell, he collected water. He caught and ate insects, frogs, and small animals. He slept in the shade of bushes and hid inside caves when he found them. Each day became a calculation of energy, heat, and survival. Time stretched unnaturally. Days felt endless. Nights were cold and lonely. Hunger hollowed out his body. His weight dropped drastically. Cuts and infections became dangerous in the harsh environment. At times, Ricky became confused and hallucinated from exhaustion and dehydration. Search teams scoured the region. Helicopters passed overhead. Ricky heard them but could not reach them. He was too weak to move quickly. Each missed rescue attempt pushed him closer to death. After 71 days alone in the desert, Ricky was finally found by farmers. He was barely alive. Severely malnourished and dehydrated, He had survived conditions that kill most people in a matter of days. Vesna Vulovic. Vesna Vulovic should not have survived the fall, but she did. On January 26, 1972, Vesna was working as a flight attendant aboard Jet Flight 3C7, traveling from Stockholm to Belgrade. It was a routine commercial flight, something she had done many times before. There was no warning, no distress call, no time to react. At cruising altitude above Czechoslovakia, a bomb exploded inside the aircraft. The plane was torn apart instantly. The fuselage shattered. Passengers and crew were thrown into open air from more than 33,000 feet above the ground. Vesna remained trapped inside a section of the aircraft as it fell. The broken piece spiraled downward, slamming into a snowy mountainside and dense forest below. The impact should have been fatal. Rescue workers later found her alive, pinned inside the wreckage. Her injuries were severe. Her skull was fractured, her legs were broken, her spine was crushed. She suffered internal injuries throughout her body. She was paralyzed and slipped into a coma that lasted several days. Doctors did not expect her to survive the night, but she did. Over the months that followed, Vesna slowly recovered. She had to relearn how to walk. She lived with constant pain. Some of her injuries never fully healed, but she lived. Investigators later tried to explain how it happened. The section of the aircraft absorbed part of the impact. Snow softened the fall. A rescuer with medical training reached her quickly. When Vesna woke up, she had no memory of the fall, only the knowledge that she had survived something no one else ever had. Michelle Knight. Michelle Knight disappeared, and no one could find her. On August 22, 2002, Michelle was walking through Cleveland, Ohio, trying to reach a courthouse. She wanted to regain custody of her young son. She never arrived. That day, she was kidnapped. Michelle was taken into a small house and locked inside. The doors were sealed, the windows were covered. No one outside could hear her. No one knew where she was. She was held captive inside the home of Ariel Castro. Inside the house, time stopped behaving normally. Days blurred into weeks. Weeks turned into years. Michelle was beaten, starved, chained, and locked away for long periods. Food was given or withheld to control her. Silence was used as punishment. She tried to escape. Every attempt failed. Each failure was followed by harsher confinement. Her body weakened. Her health deteriorated. Bones were broken. Pain became constant. She endured years of abuse with no sense of when or if it would ever end. At one point, she was forced to help raise a child born to another captive while still being treated as disposable herself. At times, Michelle reached a quiet breaking point. She understood that no rescue was coming. No one was looking. Outside, life continued. Years passed, 11 in total. On May 6, 2013, Michelle saw an opening. She kicked a door. She screamed through a crack in the wall. A neighbor heard her. Police arrived. The house was forced open. Michelle Knight walked out alive after nearly 11 years of captivity. She did not escape. She endured.